Humanity didn't really know what the hell steel actually was until embarrassingly recently. Now, I made a bunch of videos about this about 6 months ago, and I feel like I didn't make the point properly, so I'm going to take my time this time. This is not going to be a terribly entertaining video. Before you run to the comments like they did last time, I'm talking about we didn't know what the fuck carbon was until pretty recently. So slow down. So steel is an alloy of metallic iron and carbon. Now, not very much carbon, and here's the thing. The amount of carbon in the iron is very, very important here. What we want is between like 0.02% to like 2%. In that range is just like, oh, there's a bunch of really useful shit in that range right there. What I discovered doing these videos previously is that a lot of people seem to have a number of anecdotes about steel. And the thing is, that's kind of how my mind works as well. I've got so many like little anecdotes that end up being quite useful. Like, for some reason, I remember from an episode of Scrap Heap Challenge, great show, they were making submersible vehicles like submarines, and both teams immediately go, well, we need a diesel, obviously. Because apparently diesels don't flood, or like don't flood in the same way that regular petrol engines do. And for some reason, that's just stuck in my head, and that is an anecdote that's not going anywhere. Most people have one of those for steel, I think. Whether that's, oh, the Vikings used to throw bones into the fire and then, you know, something with the swords, or while the Japanese had fantastic steel that they've had for hundreds of years and stuff like that. Or that the Greeks and the Romans, they had red-headed people pee on the furnaces, and they believed that that made a greater percentage of steel. And that at places at times, people would like throw people, into furnace. All of these things are true. These are things that people tried. Because we couldn't fucking figure that out. Let's narrow this down, like, quite a lot. At what point in history could you come up to me, or someone who actually knows what they're doing, at what point would you be able to, like, come up to me with, like, a wheelbarrow full of iron, right? And be like, hello, sir, can I please get this in, this amount of carbon steel, please? At what point in history would someone, like anyone in the world, really, be able to go, oh, yeah, sure, no problem? Like, 1700s? A better argument would probably be, like, in mid-1800s, actually. But we've had steel for ages, what the fuck? So imagine bread, and you don't know what yeast is. You know that the bread is rising, and that you've been taught that if you keep like a little bit of the previous time you made bread's bread, and you added that to your new mix, and that if you didn't do that, if you didn't take that extra step, it just wouldn't rise. That's not you like knowing how bread works. That's you knowing how to get bread. We have known how to get steel for fucking ages. Thousands and thousands of years. In fact, there have been, there's evidence of, like, steel swords, like, quite early into the Bronze Age. Like, this is, I want to be clear here, Bronze Age being, this is when we were using, bronze largely for tools and stuff. There would have been some iron produced and some steel produced as a byproduct, but it was not economic yet for iron and steel to be the things that we would be using commonly. We have examples of steel swords from way before you'd reckon. Okay, so what the fuck are you talking about? So, when you refine iron, you use a bloomery furnace or a tatara. That's just what they call it in Japan. It's the same thing. Okay, so if you're refining iron before the invention of better stuff, for thousands and thousands of years, and I mean thousands and thousands, we have been refining iron with what is called a bloomery furnace or a tatara, which is just the Japanese one. It's an open top version of what I'm about to describe. You make like a clay housing, like a thing like that. A little open top bit usually, and somewhere to blow air into. Put your iron ore and like charcoal or whatever you've got in the top there, and you blow some air down the bottom. You know what, actually, I just YouTube or Google Primitive Crafts iron ore, watch those videos. That's how you do it. Can't be bothered explaining shit. So as in those videos, you make the furnace, you put the iron ore in the top, you cook the absolute shit out of it, and then at the end, after you let it cool and you break it open, you get what is called a bloom. A bloom is a big, ugly chunk of mostly wrought iron. Wrought iron is iron with a very, very low carbon content. Now, some of that bloom will be shiny. Some of that bloom, I think maybe like 10% or so, will be some form of steel. The carbon content will be in that nice, good range. Unfortunately, you don't know exactly what kind of steel it will be. Whether or not it's going to be like good for sword steel. You know, if it was going to be absolutely chock full of impurities or stuff like that, but that's fine. We have procedures for that. Now, that being, we refined iron with a bloomery furnace, and then some of that iron bloom would be steel. That is the primary way that we got steel for literally thousands of years. Now then, much, much later, we got to things like blast furnaces and kind of proto-blast furnaces and things like that, which created pig iron. And then what we did, because pig iron had too much carbon, but it also had a lower melting point. So what we did was we took some of the pig iron and we melted that, and we put some of the wrought iron in, which has even less carbon than steel does, and we'd mix that together, and some of the carbon from the pig iron would go into this, and the mixture itself would become something close enough to what steel would be. This would still not be as good, theoretically. Hedge my bets, I'm going to say probably wouldn't be as good as a nice homogeneous piece of steel that you'd get from, I don't know, a steel supplier these days. What about Damascus? I don't fucking know about Damascus steel, man. I don't think, I'm not entirely sure anyone does. Apparently there's some really, really good swords made from a kind of steel that was really, really good, made in one of many sorts of ways. I'll get into Pattern World in a second. I'm guessing there was just a mine around that area that happened to have a weird amount of any amount of trace elements that might have made that steel extra good, like, I don't know, vanadium or something. And it just turned out that the swords from this particular area just kind of kicked ass for the time. I do not know why. I got so many comments about that, though. Back to the bloomery furnaces, though. So we refine iron, we get a big ugly blob of wrought iron and a bit of steel. We break up that bloom of iron to get at these shiny pieces, and these little shiny pieces, these are the good bits. Now you could re-bloom that steel. You could take all of the wrought iron and then do the same procedure as before, but this was incredibly energy demanding, and by energy demanding I mean trees. The amount of charcoal and stuff like that you would need to use to, bloom all of this iron ore into iron and steel, there would probably be like times and places where you'd be like, yeah, we like to re-bloom twice or something like that. But again, that's an amount of stuff that you'd probably prefer to keep to not freeze to death in the winter. So until we get to like more modern blast furnaces and the Bessemer procedure or whatever it's called, using the bloomery furnaces to refine some iron, getting out the amount of steel that you got from the bloom, that was the main way that we got steel for thousands of years. Specifically what you do is you collect up all of these good bits of steel, you would heat them up to red hot and you'd smack them all together, and that would fuse weld them into one solid chunk. You might then lay that out, fold it again, fold it again, fold it again, fold it again. Did I say fuse weld or forge weld? I meant forge weld. It's when you heat a metal, usually iron or steel, up to red hot or white hot, and you sandwich it together and you smack it, and it basically becomes one more or less homogeneous chunk. Look up some blacksmithing videos on YouTube, you'll get a better idea. But for, again, thousands and thousands of years, we were going through that whole rigmarole to get something like steel. To get a steel sword, you were taking all of these little chunks and you were beating the crap out of them to get them into one homogeneous-ish bar, and then lengthening that out, etc. Now, before that, we had various ways of kind of getting steel-ish in various different ways, such as case hardening. The whole thing with like the Vikings throwing the bones on the fire and then using that to like putting your sword in the fire, that actually worked. That did allow a certain amount of carbon to leach into the outside of the sword, the outside layer of the sword, making that outside layer extra hard, which will make it extra sharp, which makes it extra good. However, that was not the same as having a steel sword. For example, if you were starting off from steel, you would probably make the sword just differently. It just had different physical properties for you to then forge with. But we're clever, humans are clever, we figured shit out. Despite the fact that we didn't necessarily know what carbon was until embarrassingly recently, we still did know that, like, these are certain things that will make a sword better. The having gingers piss on things, I think that was just someone had a thing for redheads. Now, us not understanding exactly what steel was, how to get it, the mystery of steel has been with us for thousands and thousands of years. We have understood what an alloy is, more or less, how to get an alloy, how to mix different metals together and get something that is better than the sum of its parts. But we didn't know what carbon was, how to get that into a metal, let alone precisely the right amounts. That piece of knowledge that you may have already had, or maybe you have now, that is something that people have wondered and been trying to discover for thousands and thousands of years. And now, steel is so omnipresent, it's just the good thing that we all use, that it doesn't even occur to us. The reason I'm making, there's this video, why I made them before, is because, the fact that we just, we figured it out now, and yeah, no, we do use steel for absolutely bloody everything. I just think it's amazing. And by all means, take it for granted. I feel like we earned it. As a civilization, I feel like we earned that.